every CFO is sort of board ready, right? Or could be effective on a board.
CFOs can bring skepticism.
Often when people come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about being on a board, these are all the things I bring to boards. I often say to them, what are your attributes, right?
This is my third CFO role in family businesses. In a family business, the board has to understand both the balance sheet and the family table, knowing how to influence without actually managing. As a CFO, you are used to owning the work. As a board member, you have to guide, you have to challenge, you have to support without taking over. People have to recognize if they can't commit, then don't sign up. The most interesting innovation is not necessarily technology for technology's sake. It's technology that actually improves decisions. It is all about robotics and automation.
Do you think that serving on boards helps you be a better CFO?
Gosh, I would say.
Well, welcome to the Boardroom Company Live. This is the podcast for professionals who want to learn how to build a board career. And today's guest is Linda Fonner. She is a CFO at Martin Guitar, and she's also an experienced board director of private companies. Hey, Linda, thanks for joining me.
Well, good morning, Naomi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Why don't you share a little bit about your kind of early life, like where did you grow up? How did you get into the role of the CFO and in finance?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I mean, I didn't actually grow up saying I want to be a CFO. I kind of found my way there, right? I started with accounting in high school, then I went to accounting at the university, and from there went into audit. And it was all about being curious and definitely a willingness to take on different roles that would stretch me outside my comfort zone. So I studied accounting at the university, and again, I started my early career in audit, some big names like Bank of New York Mellon, Westinghouse Electric, and those roles actually taught me, I think, like how to understand business from the inside out, if you will. And then it also trained me to ask questions, understand processes, and literally spot risk that you could see how the decision flows through the financial statements, if you will. So then I pivoted to more of an operating financial role because I wanted to be closer to the business. I didn't want to just be able to suggest how to fix things, but I actually wanted to be a part of fixing things. So I got closer to the business, and it wasn't just about looking backward at what happened. It was about helping the leadership decide what should happen next, if you will. And then from there, I took some international roles that changed my career. I moved into larger, more complex operating environments. I learned how to lead really through ambiguity, different cultures, different languages, different geography, business complexity. And it just helped me grow into that CFO path. And it was a great foundation so that I could actually add to the components of strategy. I could add to operations. I could add to people leadership, even like things around transformation. So that was how I built that, and then moved on up to the CFO. And I think if I look back, I became a CFO because I wanted to move from reporting the score to help shaping the game.
I like it. And then obviously with the role of the board director, you kind of wanted the oversight role, right? And that came in the last 4 to 5 years, right? You started to think about your board career, and then you landed your first board.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the board opportunities came from intentionally building this credibility and governance. And I didn't always just sit there and say, well, I wanted a board seat. I actually built the credibility, built the rapport, and that led to the board role. Plus, I was able to spend 6 years working at West Pharmaceutical as their chief audit executive. And that was really the beginning of it. I was in the audit committee room for 6 years. I had built that meaningful boardroom exposure before I ever served on a board. And that was from a public company perspective. So much more rigor, much more governance. And so then that helped me to understand how the boards work. It gave me good material to go on, good agenda setting, how directors actually ask questions in that forum, how the management team can build the trust or very easily lose it with the directors. And so from there, I started to invest in some board education. I started networking. I joined groups like a Private Directors Association, NACD. I'm even in Extraordinary Women on Boards, great groups for education, networking, and being able to get that exposure for that board opportunity. And so my first board and advisory opportunity came through a combination of this operating experience, this governance credibility, and then just this relationship building. It wasn't just one single moment. It took a lot of time. In fact, it took years to build. And, I didn't really want to be that generic person that says, oh, I want to be on a board. I wanted to find out like what problems boards have and help solve them. And so it came from that exposure, that intentional networking, that intentional education. And then of course, with the CFO side of things, I could really adapt and become familiar with the board and what they might need to fulfill their needs.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, right? You have to know the role of the board director. You have to be confident in where you're going. I'm sure that you were having really meaningful conversations, right, with people and all of these things. It's like not one thing necessarily gets you on a board, but essentially knowing your value, knowing what you bring. What I loved about what you said is a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them figure out what are the problems that companies have that you can help solve versus thinking it's an industry focus or it's it's a company size, right? It has to be a public company. I think if you think about it in that way, it can be a lot more helpful. Thinking through though, I mean, you've been on a few boards now. What do you enjoy most about serving on boards?
Oh, wow. I thoroughly enjoy giving back first and foremost, but I also the quality of the conversations are quite invigorating. So if you have a good board discussion that is not really about just reviewing the slide deck and focusing on the slide deck, but the conversation kind of maneuvers to where you're helping management think through one of their biggest problems or their biggest areas that they're facing problems in. I find it very, very rewarding. And then I also like to maybe step back from my day-to-day job and get into asking broader questions about strategy, risk, talent. What do they look for, long-term value? And it's sometimes even getting one-on-one conversations with the CEO or with the various leadership teams and just trying to figure out how best you can support them. And that's really what it's all about. It's just being able to support the leadership and help them with different decisions and maybe looking at some guardrails and corners that they might not be looking at.
Do you think that serving on boards helps you be a better CFO? Like does the board role, the board experience that you're getting on the side here, because of course you're a current CFO, does that help you be more strategic and think differently? How does it help?
Well, by all means it does, because it's about different leadership. It's about different companies. It's about different styles. And again, family businesses, culture, it all matters. But again, all throughout my career, I wanted to push myself outside my comfort zone, right? So being in that spot and adding value to a company from a board perspective also gives back to me on different things that I might not think about or different styles of leadership that I might not be aware of. And so it's all about give and take. So even though I'm like sitting there as a board member and I'm giving, I'm also taking away very valuable insight as well.
And obviously, there's a lot of discussion about how many boards an executive should have, and being the CFO of a company is, I'm sure, taking up a lot of your time. But how many boards do you think is optimal for an executive, someone in a C-suite role like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the person's executive role, and maybe the types of boards and the time commitment that they have. So like if you're a full-time CFO or if you're a full-time CEO, you have to be realistic, and you have to really figure out how much time you have and manage your time. You have to make sure there's no conflicts, and not all boards are equal. Like a public company board is really a heavy lift compared to a private company board, or a private company board compared to an advisory board role. It completely different type of role and time commitment. So I guess the key question here is like whether whether you can be fully prepared, you can attend meetings, be engaged, you can contribute to those meetings, but also contribute between meetings, and then be available when something unexpected happens. If you need to get on a call immediately and be able to react to something, be available. So the right number of boards is not like a pure number, if you will.
Yeah,
it's like how you can be prepared, how you can engage, how you can independently be useful. And so for me, I'm very, very active on multiple fronts, but some of them are, nonprofits, some of them are advisory, and then some of them are just being a board of director. And it's all about the lift that it takes to commit to those. And by all means, I think, people have to recognize if they can't commit, then don't sign up.
Yeah, that's true, right? You don't overextend yourself, right? And don't you think also that boards kind of go through different phases too? So they may be involved in an acquisition, and therefore you may have to attend more meetings, or there may be a crisis and they may be wanting to leverage your experience. So does that play into it as well?
Oh, right. By all means. Yeah. Like, so I've been involved in some M&A activity, right? So even in the M&A world, the board's role is really to make sure that the deal, makes strategic sense, it's financially sound, it fits culturally. You make sure that the risks have been identified. And so the board should ask whether the deal fits the strategy, whether the management has the capacity to execute it. They should challenge the valuation. They should definitely ask about synergies. I mean, those all things are so important when these special deals pop up, that you have to be able, as a board member, to be able to articulate and ask. And then I think make sure that management's not just falling in love with the deal. They're proving that the deal deserves to be loved, if you will. And so those things do pop up occasionally. Sometimes there's companies that have crisis, and you have to jump in and make sure that the management are thinking about all the different components to a crisis. And so those take extra time, but it's not the norm, right? It's not the norm when you're dealing with maybe private or family run companies today. It would be more maybe on the public side of things, but I do see little areas like this that do pop up and take a bit more time.
When I'm speaking to people, I get a lot of people saying, oh, I don't think I'll ever be on a board. I'm not a CFO. I don't know why it's that role. It just is. Or I'm not a CEO. They say CEO and CFO, which to their credit are some of the top titles. But if you look at any board, you will see all sorts of different titles, right, on the board. But those are higher ranking in the order, right? But tell me, not every CFO is on a board, so I don't think that every CFO is sort of board ready, right? Or could be effective on a board. What do you think CFOs do bring to boards that make them so effective?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is like this financial discipline, maybe even risk awareness, or even like how you would allocate your capital. A good CFO will understand the operating model, right? They'll look at the revenue, they'll look at the margin, they'll look at working capital, they might look at the cash flow, all that stuff. Debt, CapEx, capital spend, tax, systems control, all that stuff. And then they'll filter that back into where the business is healthy or where it's under pressure. So CFOs can bring skepticism in a good way, just by having that baseline to go from. I think, yeah, I mean, for me, I think CFOs bring the ability to connect strategy. They can look at the risk aspects, over here on the investment side, the capital, and then execute it all in a very practical way. Sometimes I think that the CFOs, they position themselves way too narrowly when looking at the board avenue, and maybe just focus on, oh yeah, I'm a CFO, I'm a CPA, and I only want to do audit committee. Well, that's good and fine, but there's other aspects, and I think you have to just have that broad horizon and understand the full operating model, and then take the components that you learned in your day-to-day job and then bring it to light to the board members or to the management team.
I'm sure also as a CFO, you've had a lot of experience mentoring, CEOs, but we're not mentoring them necessarily, but certainly working side by side with them. So that will be a relationship that will be very, familiar. And then of course, potentially mentoring the CFO if you're on a board as well, right? The CFO of the company.
That's right. In fact, that does happen a lot. Informally, you might want to have a company that you're sitting on and has a little bit junior CFO in the role, and by all means that you can mentor them and help bring them along, and maybe even share some practical examples from your experience on how to present to boards the financial data, or how to think outside the box and challenge the norm. It does happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, and that's possibly the reason why not every CFO, right, joins a board, because maybe they're looking at it a little bit too narrowly. Let's talk about the board meeting, because I talk about this a lot. I know you're on the board of, you've been on boards, and you're also CFO, so I'm sure you're in the boardroom in all cases, right? But what are some of the things that make an effective board meeting? What have you seen?
So I think, having a good agenda, first and foremost, having prepared materials to pre-read. I think having good trust among everyone that's in the room, being vulnerable at times. I think coming prepared and being ready to ask those questions that will spark, what's right going forward. What have you thought about? What have you not thought about? What are you willing to give up? Those types of things that will stretch maybe management to think about things they don't normally think about. And then just, having the EQ, if you will, about asking things in a way that's not really trying to manage the business, like stepping back and looking from the outside in, and then guiding management or challenging management, but not actually managing the company. That means a lot.
And it's funny, isn't it, when people think about, often when people come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about being on a board, these are all the things I bring to boards. I often say to them, what are your attributes, right? And the attributes fall into what you've just described, right? Which is being prepared for board meetings, having trust, integrity, speaking up, having the courage to speak up, and then knowing your role, right? Knowing that your role is not to be the CFO, but to oversee, right, all of the business, not just the finances. So I think to your point, it's an effective board meeting. You can actually communicate with people how you would be in a board meeting, right? Yeah. When you're getting into some of these boards. Quick one. I know you've had quite a lot of family-owned business experience, and manufacturing is pretty high on. I would say. I don't know the data, but I'm pretty sure that manufacturing has probably a higher proportion of family-owned businesses, and it can be first gen, fourth gen, right? Like it could be all of the above, and there's all sorts of different things. But what is it like on a family-owned business board for anybody listening or viewing here that might be in the middle of an interview or really targeting a family-owned business board?
Yeah, it's a great question, Naomi, because I mean, this is my third CFO role in family businesses, and this is my second. I'm on my third, actually, my third board role in a family business, and it is different. It is totally different. So, I like to say, in a family business, the board has to understand both the balance sheet and the family table. Who's sitting around the family table. But yeah, so family-owned business boards are different because it's all about the legacy. It's about the values. It's about the ownership. Family dynamics, who's fighting and who's not. Long-term stewardship, basically, are always parts of the conversation. And sometimes the question is, what is right for the company, the family, the employees, and then the next generation. And you have to keep all of that in every conversation that you have. So family boards are the work's very, very meaningful, but it's also much more complex. And the board has to go in just totally respecting the family's values and still help the business remain financially strong and strategically relevant. And I think sometimes in the family business space, the governance is especially important because family businesses don't normally focus on that. And stepping into that, I have found that that's one of my strengths, actually. I bring a lot of governance to family businesses because they haven't thought about different things. And so when you have ownership, you have management, you have family, the clear roles and responsibilities, they have to be defined. And so I actually really enjoy the board work on family businesses. Again, mid-market it's a great opportunity for helping them grow, think strategically, think long-term, and then really get involved enough that you're caring about the people, you're caring about the reputation, you're almost a part of the family at the end, but yet you're still able to sit back and ask the challenging questions. So there's a lot of rewards coming out of being on a family board.
I think, there's, you're working on behalf of the shareholders and stakeholders, which is sort of like a sort of standard term for boards, but this is a different. Shareholders and stakeholders have, it's a complex area, right? Like there's people who maybe have grown up in that business. They were born into the business, and others that have sort of sidestepped into it because they were married into the business, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of that. But as you said, I guess if someone's looking for a family-owned business board, they have to work into their value proposition, kind of the differences between those shareholders and stakeholders. I think that would be a good way of doing it.
You're absolutely right.
Now, I know you've had quite a lot of international experience, and I do get a lot of guests here on my podcast who have kind of served, been on a company abroad or a board abroad or anything like that. What is your international experience? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate to live and work internationally across multiple regions. I worked with Bristol Myers Squibb in Dubai, and I covered the whole Middle East, Africa, India region. I worked in Thailand with a company called Autotech. It was a German industrial chemical manufacturer, and that covered all of Southeast Asia and India. And that was unique because it was a pre-IPO turnaround, so that was getting ready to go public. And I did some interim financial leadership roles in Brazil early on in my career. And I also was able to work in Australia. So what that taught me very, very early on, and again, those experiences, I truly believe, shaped me as a leader today, because you learned very, very quickly what works in one country absolutely may not work in another country. So I learned a lot about humility. I had to, really listen and understand the local context. And for me, it was about building trust before actually trying to drive change. And I remember my very first expat assignment in Australia. I had it reversed. I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive change. I'm going to move. And I didn't have that trust built. And so I learned from that experience. And so The second expat role was different, and of course the third was even better. So the international experience, it taught me that finance was a global language, but leadership is always local. So I even went as far as learning Arabic. When I was in the Middle East, the Thai language was a little bit more complex and difficult for me, so I wasn't as successful. Being in Brazil, learned Portuguese as well. And so you embed yourself. You get trust. You build up your credibility. You have that rapport, and then once you have that, like, you can start to drive the change. And so it was pretty cool. And I wouldn't change anything for the world. I really enjoyed that. It really helped me grow as a leader. And I learned very early on that, like I said, what may work in America certainly doesn't always work in other countries.
Well, it's even like the English language, right? Pretty much most, not all, but there are some countries where they speak English as the primary language, like the UK and Australia and New Zealand. And then there are other countries where it's the second language, but they still speak it really well. I still think that even the countries that speak English, I think it can be deceiving, right? Because
Totally.
you think, oh yeah, we're all the same. We're all speaking the same language. It's a little accent, right? But actually, there's a huge difference in culture everywhere you go. So it's good. It's a very good thing to learn how to adapt, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember, if I could tell one quick funny story. I remember in Australia, when we first arrived there, my husband and I would get together with friends, and they would say, oh, I got to go out and get a slab. And I'm like, okay, get a slab. Is that a slab of a sandwich, or, what is it? But they were actually referring to a slab of beer. And the English language, we couldn't figure it out, but it's quite funny how you do pick up on different things just being embedded in a different culture in a different country. But we have, tons of fun stories like that. They're good memories.
You find yourself saying yes, and then you're just drinking every night of the week because you're not quite sure what it is that we're doing tonight. Yeah.
Right.
You get caught up in that. Well, let's these skills are obviously really important, and you've built them as you go. I feel like you're also a lifelong learner, and you've been building your skills as a CFO and on boards. What skills do you need to build on boards at the moment? What do you think is really important to learn about that is affecting companies and boards right now?
Gosh, I would say the probably the one skill is knowing how to influence without actually managing.
Mm-hmm.
As a CFO, you are used to owning the work. As a board member, you have to guide, you have to challenge, you have to support without taking over. I think that's one that I continue to have to work on because I'm so passionate about what I do that I just want to jump right in and help as much as I can. So that's definitely, influence without managing. I'd say another one is like enterprise pattern recognition. So what I mean by that is like big, picture view. You're not just looking at finance. You're looking at all these operating aspects of the business strategy. Maybe even your CEO performance, succession. What's your bench strength look like? Of course, culture. Culture is so important. Cybersecurity, again, I'll talk about that as well. That's an important one. Customer risk, technology, stakeholder trust. Those are all the enterprise level pattern recognitions that you have to be on top of as well. Now, if I go back and reflect on cybersecurity for a little bit, because I do have quite a bit of IT in my background as well, and certifications, that's been an important board skill that I started to underestimate, but then it become more and more prevalent. So I started to invest in cybersecurity governance training. As a CPA, you've got to have continuing education. So I took, my continuing education in that space and started to learn more and more about it. And then I came across this great course that Christine Baird from Claris Tech Partners, she created this great course. I know you've had her on your podcast.
She has been on my podcast. Yeah. She was here a couple
Yeah.
of months back. Yep. No,
Yeah. So
she's amazing. Yeah.
her and I, we've been working together probably for 7 years now. She's a great colleague, a great friend, and so she went out and she developed this board of directors cybersecurity governance certification program, and I was one of her guinea pigs. And so I went online. It's fully self-paced. And you go and study and you learn, and then you take an exam and and there's multiple modules in that coursework. And so I was able to feed back to her some real-time enhancement of that program. It's live and running excellent right now. There's a lot of people that are taking that course. And so I continue to take things like that and just continuing to educate myself. And again, it allows me to make sure that the management team, if you're a board member and you're sitting on the board of a company, you need to make sure that they're cyber ready, that what does their incident response look like? Have they taken into account like all the third party risk, insurance, who do you call when something happens? And all this training and this education, it allows you to be a better board member. So it's like you said, continuous learning.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, again, lifelong learner is probably one of the common themes across all the board members that I interview on this podcast, and just in general when I speak to them, they have a desire to learn what's new, and so cybersecurity. I think these certifications, or so much for the certification, it's great, but I think you have to stay up to date with what's going on. I don't think that you can just sort of, hey, I heard from someone or I've done some reading. I think you have to go to the experts for some of these things to really learn what's new. I think there's some things in governance where you learn it once and you're kind of okay, you're kind of set for the next 5 to 10 years, right? Not a lot of change happens. But I think with certain topics like cybersecurity, I feel like that's an area that you do need to have, just a lot more attention from some of the people out there that are kind of on the ground watching what's going on. Just on the topic of kind of innovations and things that are happening, you're obviously in a lot of manufacturing, industrials. Are there any sort of interesting innovations that are out there that you've heard about that could be interesting to share with our audience?
Oh, most definitely. In fact, it's evolving very fast. Of course, everybody's talking about AI. So AI for sure, artificial intelligence. I think also like ERP data tools like Power BI, definitely a forefront. How cybersecurity and AI governance are evolving. But from a manufacturing point of view, for me, it is all about robotics and automation in manufacturing. Really? Yeah, because so companies have so certain companies do have labor constraints. They might be in certain areas of the country that just don't have a lot of labor to pick from. They continue to have quality needs. They continue to have repetitive processes. Every manufacturing entity has repetitive processes. So this idea of automation, it can be a major source of productivity. And of course, improved productivity means your margin is improving and your costs are reducing. And so it's a great evolution for companies. And I think, the most interesting innovation is not necessarily technology for technology's sake. It's technology that actually improves decisions, it reduces your risk, and it helps people execute better. For example, AI, using it in forecasting, production planning, inventory visibility, maybe even customer service, fraud detection, like, looking, something as simple as scrubbing the internet for counterfeits. That fraud detection, it can add so much value. And then when you talk about this whole Power BI attached to a true ERP system database, it gives you real-time visibility into operations and costs. Like, boom, you pull it up on your phone. You've got real-time data. You can start making decisions a much faster, having more agility. And then again, on the cyber and the AI governance, a lot of companies are using AI to figure out, well, I mean, backing up on the governance, they need to figure out how their data is protected, who's making decisions, how are these models are governed. And we have these conversations about all of these topics actually in the boardroom. They actually tend to overtake some of the meetings. Actually, they're good, healthy discussions.
Yeah, I think one of the roles of the board director is to bring ideas to the table, innovations that are happening. They may not all be relevant, right? They may not all be within the budget of the company, right? So there's a lot of cost involved in some of these innovations. But as you said, if it's decreasing the time spent manufacturing the product, but increasing the productivity and increasing the value, and the quality of the product, then it seems like something that should be looked at. So let's wrap up a little bit here. So you're obviously on the board. Martin Guitar, they make guitars, right? Tell us a bit about what they do.
Yeah, so I am the CFO at the iconic Martin Guitar Company, and I've been in the role for about 8 months now. So it's a new role for me, and it's a family-run business, nearly 200 years old.
Wow.
And it has such a deep, rich, embedded culture because many of the workers have been there their entire life. Even on the finance team, I think my most junior person is 21 years in the company, and my most senior person 46 years in the company. So,
Wow.
great culture. But again,
Wow.
we make great acoustic guitars. We make strings for those guitars. We make ukuleles as well, and the iconic brand is known all over the world. So not necessarily new to the whole manufacturing process, but definitely new to the entertainment side of the business. And I'm enjoying it tremendously so far.
Can you play the guitar?
I'm learning. I started learning. I am trying to spend 5 minutes a day, learning different chords, just getting acclimated to the guitar. It's actually quite an awkward instrument to hold and to maneuver, but I'm having a lot of fun at it. Again, this continuous learning, like why not? As an adult, let's keep learning new things.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I was sort of encouraged to play the violin when I was very young, and then I was encouraged not to play the violin anymore because it was such a terrible sound. But violin, I think, versus guitar. But yes, still, these things take a long time and many hours. So good for you for starting something new that's testing you. I think it's good, right? It's good for the brain.
That's right.
Okay, so what is next for you? I know that you sit on is it a nonprofit board and a private company corporate board, right? Sue Steele.
Yeah, that's right. So Sue Steele, another family-run business, manufacturing a lot of different agricultural type products, but they're most famous for their stainless steel galvanized grain bins that you would see all over farm fields everywhere. So I sit on that board. I am an advisor for a digital learning platform called Trained Arrow. And this digital learning platform is instrumental to me because when I was in the Middle East, I was helping it get the tool into Arabic. And so it's not only in English, it's in Arabic, and we're looking to possibly put it into Portuguese as well. The digital learning tool helps bridge the gap between your university learnings and your first business job learnings. And it's a fun automated tool to get online and learn from. And then I've been on a Bitcoin mining company board called Hashwatt. That was my very early on first one. I'm not on that anymore, but I have several learnings from that, and it was a great experience. And I made some great colleagues out of that journey as well. And so, yeah, and then I continue to be active on many other networking groups. Like I said before, I'm in the Private Directors Association and running the Programs Committee, and the NACD, helping on the private company front, get more exposure into NACD and the audience that attends NACD events on the private company governance space, as well as other groups. So yeah, quite a busy person.
It sounds like it. It definitely sounds like it. But again, like you said, you're managing your time. I know you put on the thing here, board member by night. That's really it. And I hear that from a lot of people is, they use their weekends, they use their evenings, they even use sometimes PTO, right, to go to board meetings and to do these things. So I think, it can be done. And I think it's so important for people to start building their board career while they're an executive. It really does helps the companies, it helps them. And of course, if the time comes where you or somebody decides, actually, I think I want to do the board work full time and take a back seat on the executive career, maybe you want to call it retirement, I don't know. But you already hit the ground running. So I think I think the message here today is, you have to keep busy, you have to stay relatable, stay learning. I've written a lot of things down here about time and the role of the CFO on a board, which is absolutely essential. And I think even if people are listening and they're not a CFO, which again is what I hear a lot, hey, I'm not a CFO. I think all of the things you've described are things we can relate to as leaders. So I think that there is so much relatable that's there. Any final words, Linda? Any plans for the rest of the year or anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, just maybe to sum it up, it's I want to continue to bring the CFO discipline and an operator's practicality into the boardroom, where the growth and governance and long-term value creation matters. That's kind of my tagline, and I stick with that, and continue to look for new opportunities where I can serve and I can help CEOs and owners and leadership teams to make better decisions and build long-term value. So I want to continue doing that.
Wonderful, Linda, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And it's been great catching up, and I'm sure we'll see each other again soon.
You got it. Thank you so much, Naomi. You have a great rest of the weekend.
You too. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks. Okay.
All right, bye.
Bye for now.